Well, good morning, and it's great to be back here. When Danny reached out a couple of weeks ago, or whenever it was, and invited me back, I took that as a good sign because I was here in February, so I figured if they're inviting me back, it was either good or they couldn't find anybody else. Either way, I'm really happy to be here. It's pretty stiff competition this morning. We had a drummer debut, Power Ranger references, so I don't know if I can keep up with that. And Jacob really tempted me to go way off this script because my professional life is in substance abuse prevention. And so I work part-time at Randolph-Macon. I'm the alcohol and drug education coordinator there. I work full-time for the state, helping all the communities throughout Virginia come up with substance abuse prevention plans. And as part of that job this past week, I spent 5 days in 5 different communities in Southwest Virginia who are absolutely being torn apart by this opiate epidemic. And to sit in with these folks who are working on the front lines with these people is both heartbreaking and encouraging, because there are a lot of people out there doing some really good things to try to stop this and prevent it. And so I'm not going to go way off message because I'll be here all day, but I am going to say one thing to the church, and it will directly tie in to what I'm going to talk about today. Hopefully you'll pick up on it in the end, but I've been directly or indirectly dealing in this for about 25 years. And I go back 25 years, and the whole idea around substance abuse prevention was, well, we just need to teach these people that taking drugs, alcohol, whatever it is a really bad idea. Let's just educate them, teach them how harmful it is, and then they'll stop doing it. Fortunately, 25 years later, we now know what an asinine approach that is, because what I've discovered, and it's been a real learning process, is at the root of almost all of that is hurting. At the root of almost every substance abuse issue you'll come across is hurting, some kind of hurting, whether it's a mental health challenge, whether it's a relationship or a work challenge, a physical challenge. Hurting is at the root, and where we go so wrong with it is we keep trying to implement this approach that we just have to educate them. We have to make smarter people. We have to make people who are capable of making better decisions. And we're never going to get there if we all don't come together and understand this is a hurting problem. And so what's the church called to be? Healers. That's where we come in, and that's where I think the church can stand up and really be the end to this epidemic, the people who can make a real big and forever change in this. And so and Danny, I'll come back and talk about this for a whole message someday, because I am really passionate about this, because I can get very critical of the church at times about not getting in their healing role in this thing. And that's why I love Compass, because you all are here, because you have a real passion for getting out there and being healers and being loved in the community. So that's my sort of sermon A. Oh. You want me to turn it on and talk? Okay, sorry. Hopefully that, do I need to repeat that? Is that right here? So, my real message today, I'm here today. So I've been on this running journey, and I'm going to talk a little bit about being a runner. That's repeat from some of what I might have talked about last time. And before you get to thinking too much, oh my God, he's going to spend this whole time talking about running. I'm not really. Hopefully you'll get that. But about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago now, a young woman in Hanover County, Maycross Menzies, was hit and killed by a motorist while she was out running and training for the Boston Marathon. At the same time, I was probably sitting on a couch or doing something very non-running. I was not a runner. I didn't want to be a runner. But the week after Meg was hit and killed, one of her friends put out a Facebook post and said, hey, next Saturday, let's all go out and run and honor Meg. And so I figured, okay, if I'm ever going to run, this should be the one time that I go do it. I'll go do this run, and then I'll go back to the couch, and I'll never do this again. And so on that Saturday, I went out and ran 8 miles and fit in with the whole run for Meg. And so fast forward a little bit, that did not turn out to be the last time that I ran. In fact, in the 4 years since then, I've run and completed 2 marathons, 11 half marathons in 6 different states. One of those was in the Cayman Islands. And I'm now training to run a 35-mile race in the Georgia mountains come September. So this whole running journey turned into something very different. But I'm not here today to talk you into being runners, and I'm not even going to talk about a running journey. I'm going to talk about why this journey has become so powerful in my life. And I don't think it's a coincidence, because if anybody's ever heard the story of Meg Cross Menzies, the first thing you'll almost always hear is, and especially if you talk with her mom or any close friends, is you're going to hear about a life that was rooted in a love for Christ. It's the first thing you'll ever hear, even though she was a very accomplished runner. And so, me and running, what I discovered was this place and this space and this quiet that allowed me to have a much deeper relationship with God. And at the core of that relationship was this prayer life with God. And more specifically, see, I always thought a prayer life with God was, okay, God, I'm ready to talk to you. I have this list of things I kind of need. So I'm going to place my order in. Right, here's what I need you to do to help get my life fixed. And kind of like Amazon Prime, if you could get this to the door in like an hour, will be really cool. And if it doesn't show up, I'm going to be complaining and writing reviews, and that's not how it works. That's how I tried to make it work. And that is all centered on this idea. I kind of have a picture for my life. I have this life that I've been imagining and working toward, and God, to the degree you can come in and help me make this happen, let's do that. Let's have that conversation. But what I found out is that this prayer life, this relationship with God, is about kind of like when we talk. Somebody talks, and then somebody talks, and you listen. That was the piece that had been missing in my life, in my relationship with God, was this whole listening part. And so when you get out and you run a long way, and you run a lot, you get very bored, and some days you just start hearing things, and over time I realized what I was starting to hear was God in my life. He was talking back, and many times he was starting to say, shut up, I've got something to say. And probably the story I'm going to tell you that drives this home the most. So last September, I was out running. I live in Ashland. So I was out running around Ashland and had no particular agenda in mind. Really wasn't training for anything. Just come home, and days are long. Running's a very cool release for that. So I was out running, and for some reason, I kept getting these impressions of the Hurricane Harvey disaster down in Texas. I just kept seeing these pictures that had been on the news, and I'm going to tell you something. When you start getting images like that over and over, that may be God talking to you in a way that you had grown accustomed to ignoring. That may be Him whispering things into your life that you had never heard before. And so this was a day when I decided that, okay, there's something to this. There's something to these images. So I had a group of friends who had already signed up. They were going to run the Hokie Half Marathon over at Virginia Tech later that month. So I came home and I decided that I'm going to go run that race, and I'm going to try to do something to help these Hurricane Harvey victims down in Texas. So my thought was, I'll just raise a little money. Because runners do that a lot. They go out and run, and they try to raise money for different causes. So my thought was, okay, God gave me this whisper, this message. I'll try to raise a little relief, and we'll be all good. So one thing with me, though, is I love stories. I love writing. I love sharing stories. So I put out on Facebook, I said, hey, I want to make this a little more personal. I'd rather not just raise money, kind of hand it over to United Way or whatever. No critic or no offense to any of that. So I had this friend that I'd worked with like 10 years earlier, hadn't seen her in 10 years. She responds, yes, I actually know the minister of fun at a church in Texas. So you had me a minister of fun. Any church that has a minister of fun, I'm like all in. So I talked with Tom Lusk. He was the minister of fun down there. And he said, I really can't help you, but I can put you in touch with, it was an Episcopal church. He said, I can put you in touch with Father Jim, Pastor Debbie. They'll talk to you and see what you can work out. And so I got on the phone with them. God wanted me on the phone with these two people because we started having this conversation about their church, and he said, Keith, here's the deal. We have always looked at our church as a no-walls church. There are no walls in our church. The walls of our church are the community. And so we have been being prepared for 25 years for this disaster. And so I shared that conversation with a lot of people. I actually did an interview with them. I shared this thing. And then all of a sudden, my thoughts of, well, I want to raise a couple $100 for hurricane relief in Texas. People listened to this message from these folks from St. Andrew's Church in Pearland, Texas, and they said, that's the kind of church I want to be a part of. And so this dream of a couple $100 became $2,500 that we were able to raise for this church. And so I'm starting to see God just working in this thing. Well, after we did that, Tom, the minister of fun, trying to bring not so much fun to my life, I think, he reached out and said, you really need to come to Texas. I'm like, well, that was not part of the plan. That wasn't in the vision. He said, you need to come down here and run a race. And I said, okay, well, I don't really know of any races down there. He said, well, the Houston Marathon is in January. So I went and looked it up, and at this time I had run one marathon in Richmond. It was incredibly hard. I barely finished before they were going to drag me off the course. And I committed pretty soon after that, I'm never doing this again. So I went immediately to the Houston Marathon website and looked up the half marathon, and it was sold out, and I said, okay, well, some other day. We'll find another race another time. It was about a half hour later, after this conversation, after finding the Houston half marathon sold out, when my friend Robin, who's an avid marathon runner, I've met her through this journey, she lives in the Cayman Islands, she sends me a message that says, you know, you really, this story's too big, you gotta go to Texas. I'm like, God. So I shared this with her, I thought about that, and Tom actually reached out, but we hit a roadblock because the half marathon is sold out, so it's going to have to be some of the time, some other race. She said, well, do the marathon. She said, I'm doing the marathon. I was supposed to do it last year. My husband's work schedule had a conflict, so I had to defer it to this week. So there she was, already planted and going to be in Houston. So I told her what I told her, that the race, half marathon sold out. I'm not doing the marathon. She says, why not? I said, I did one of those, way too hard. I'm not doing it again. And her response in some sort of way was, you don't think these hurricane victims are having a hard time? And about 15 minutes later, I was signed up for the Houston Marathon. Now, the real complicating factor in that became that Richmond had a 7-hour time limit, and I already told you I needed every minute of that. And I had done a lot more running, I was a little bit better off, but Houston had a 6-hour time limit. And so I knew that was going to be a real stretch for me. But I figured we're going to do it. So my wife, Katie, and the 2 boys, Ian and Elliot, sitting here, we decided we're going to make this a family thing, so we're all going to go to Houston. Well, then, over the course of the next couple of months, I started having all these friends from Seattle, from Illinois, Cayman, Alabama, South Carolina. They all started saying, we're going too. We're going to go to Houston and do this thing too. And so, again, this was an image of hurricane disasters in Ashland in my head, wanting to raise a couple of $100 and thinking that was my deal. That was my big idea. And God was just running with this thing. So we partnered with St. Andrew's Church. This was back in January. And so we go down there. And so one of the things we got to do when we went down there was we got to go see one of the homes that they were working on. And we went into that home, and it's Miss Norma. I don't know how many kids. There were kids everywhere. And the church was in there repairing this house. She's got her kids, plus she's babysitting other kids, trying to make ends meet. And so I asked Father Jim, why are they even living in here? He said it's the only home they've ever known. The only way they would agree to let us help them is if they could stay. It's the only home they've ever known. This mom's heart for her kids said, we're not going anywhere else. You know, you start thinking about this life you're praying for yourself. You start thinking about your own plans for life and then the reality of some other people's lives. We got to go to a local elementary school. They took us there and we got to be a part of a career fair. You know, I got to talk about my work in substance abuse prevention, and there was a little kid sitting in the front row. And when it was all over, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, you do? And I just thought maybe a health class or something. So no, my uncle, he starts drinking in the morning and he drinks till he goes to bed at night. Here we are in Houston, Lawn Elementary School. And God is talking, right? This is this two-way conversation. I'm telling you, that little kid is God's voice just speaking into my heart, and Miss Robin was there. The night before the race, this church, St. Andrew's Church, this little church, they put on this dinner just for all of us who came down. I mean, they did the whole deal. They had on the robes, they had communion. They had made out 26 scriptures based on money just for the dozen or so of us that were there, pouring their hearts into us. So this is all before the race. So, race, I think it's Sunday. And I had kind of forgotten, I got to run a marathon. And I got to find a way to do this thing faster than I've ever done. And for about the first half marathon, I was good. I was running the pace that I needed to finish. And about mile 17, long story short, I knew I wasn't finishing this thing. And so when you're a runner, and you work towards something, you built this thing up with everybody. I'm going to go to Houston. I'm running my second marathon, doing this for the hurricane victims. And then you suddenly realize, I've got to quit. And by quit, I mean, so Houston, they take this serious. They got a big line of cop cars, flashing lights, couple of people carrying tall banners at the end of the line, and so if you don't keep up here, we're kicking you off in a very nice way. And I knew that that was my end game, and it was. And so at mile 18, I texted my wife, Katie, and said, I'm not going to be able to do this. You know, that was the first admission. I'm going to fail at this today. And so then the next step was they load you up on this big bus, and in my own words, I'm sitting on a bus with all the rest of the losers, all the rest of the quitters, can't finish it, can't hang with it, all of these negative things that start going through your head. And then you have to ride this bus all the way back to the finish line and deal with all of your thoughts. And a lot of my thoughts dealt with, I had, 7, 8 friends who were out there running, who were going to cross the finish line, who were going to do everything they set out to do. They were going to accomplish this plan that they put in place, and I wasn't. I was going to be the only one. And so my wife sent a very loving message, said, we're all still proud of you. And then one by one, that started this parade of messages that I started getting, and all of them around this theme of, you already did what you were supposed to do here. You already accomplished the plan. And, we get that confused a lot. For me, maybe it's money. Maybe with you, it's work. Maybe it's some other hobby, some other passion that carries us away, that gets us to thinking this is the plan. It can get easy to be confused that this isn't always God's plan. And I'm going to tell you, by the time this bus got to the finish line and I got all these hugs and support, God had reminded me loud and clear. When I talked to you in Ashland, this was my deal, not yours. This was mine, not yours. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you got something out of it. But you will screw this whole thing up if you start thinking this is about you and not about me. And I think we all struggle with that. And the degree we struggle with it, I will tell you, because I check myself with it far more now, the degree we struggle with it, we can answer that question by asking ourselves, how do we pray? How are we praying? Are we praying to tell God something about this plan that we have for our life? Are we praying with an openness and a willingness to listen about this plan He has for our life? They can be really different things sometimes. And they're hard to keep on the same thing. But if you find yourself praying, and you find yourself, you've prayed and not once, then open to considering, what does God want to say to me in this prayer? You may be missing out on something. And here's the thing. You're right. I haven't even looked at this yet. Here's the thing, that we, all of us, can really complicate God's plan. The reality is, His plan for us is really, really simple. Now, we all have different jobs and different hobbies, different passions. It's not all running. A lot of us work with wood, hunt, we have different jobs. That makes it complicated. But God's plan isn't complicated. I don't know how many times in the Bible, I actually looked this up this morning, I couldn't find it, but God all over the Bible is calling us to Him. So many scriptures say, you are called. That is us. And that calling is the same. And it's scriptural. So I want to read this to you. And it's Matthew 25, 34 through 40. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now, before I go to the rest of it, that's a pretty powerful statement, right? That's a piece in this scripture we often look over, but to this morning, that really stuck out to me pretty strong, because from the foundation of the world, that's saying this foundation that God spoke into being was the foundation for this calling that he's about to talk about in the rest of this scripture. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And he's going to answer, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me. This is the common call. No matter how complicated we make it, this is what God is calling us to do. This is that run towards him. Now, I have a favorite author in the world, might be bordering on my favorite person in the world because of his ability to love other people and then write about it. So I'm going to translate what I just read in Bob Goff terms, because this simplifies it. Bob Goff says, I've met a lot of people who say they're waiting for God to give them a plan for their lives. And every other time he uses plan after this is in quotation marks. They talk about this plan like it's a treasure map God has folded up in his back pocket. Only pirates have those. People who want a reason to delay often wait for plans. People who are becoming love don't. It's almost as if Jesus knew we'd invent excuses under the guise of waiting for his plan, so he made it simple for us. He said his plan for all of us was to love him and then find people who are hungry or thirsty or who feel like strangers or are sick or don't have clothes or are in prison or creep us out or are our enemies, and go love them just like they were him. Game, set, match. We can stop looking for another plan. That's it. Instead of just agreeing with Jesus, I started looking around my life for the kind of people Jesus said we'd be talking about when we finally meet him on the other side of heaven's threshold. I was kind of hoping I could just find one guy who was hungry and thirsty and sick and strange and naked and in jail. This way I could get it all done at once. It doesn't work that way, though. I've found out it's everybody. It's all of us in one way or another. It's me, it's you, it's the person next to you at the coffee shop right now. I know it's hard to believe, but they're Jesus. Even the ones who look and act so differently than he did, they're Jesus. As I wrap this up, there's one line in this thing that I've thought about a lot lately. He said, instead of just agreeing with Jesus, I started looking around my life for the kind of people Jesus said we'd be talking about when we finally meet him on the other side of heaven's threshold. You know, I've thought about this. We're all being called to this ultimate conversation with Jesus. I don't think we often think about heaven, think about that relationship as personal as that. Sometimes God is just symbolic. Sometimes God is just this thing or this belief in our life. But if you think about God as this ultimate conversation, you start thinking about, how do I make those conversations with him today look like the ones I want to have with him in eternity? And here's the thing. Jesus has already told us what he wants to talk about. I think he might want to talk about the Duke basketball team, Notre Dame football in my case. He may want to talk about running. But pretty quickly, he wants to get to this piece of talking about what we have done with him, for him, through him. I think it gives us something to ask ourselves throughout every day. I'm starting to look at life as this way of collecting conversation starters with Jesus. And I'd like to collect enough of them to think that eternity, we might need all of eternity to carry on those conversations. So the parting thought that I'll leave you with is that this week in our prayer life, let's have the kind of conversations that we hope to have on down the road in eternity, because ultimately that is what we're being called to. That is this run that I'm on. It's the run we're all on. It does have a finish line, and we've been called to it, and it's been defined for us. We just have to ask ourselves every day, is this the race that we're running?